No television show in American history has ever created as profound a cultural impact as Soul Train. Then in 2006, the show abruptly vanished without a farewell. All details surrounding its conclusion were kept under wraps except for one, a recorded episode that never aired. What unfolded behind those unreleased scenes? Let us go back to the beginning to explore today's story in depth. But behind the polished smiles and effortless rhythm, the story was never as smooth as it looked. And in the end, the moment that was supposed to honor everything he created would destroy it forever. The birth of a movement. Before the world knew his name, Don Cornelius was just another working man in Chicago. He'd sold insurance, directed traffic, and dreamed of something bigger, something that could redefine how black life was seen on screen. In 1966, after taking a short broadcasting course, he joined WCIU-TV, a small local station that gave him a taste of what was possible. That's where the idea began to grow, a music show that wasn't about imitation or stereotypes, but about authenticity. Young people, real music, real joy. In August 1970, Soul Train premiered locally in Chicago. The show had a shoestring budget and no big sponsors, just a few cameras, a crowd of local teens, and Don's deep belief that it could matter. Against all odds, it did. Within months, Soul Train exploded across the city, drawing attention for its energy, its pride, and its unapologetic blackness. When national syndication came in October 1971, it was revolutionary. For the first time, a nationwide audience saw a show fully produced, hosted, and centered around black artists and culture, something no major network had ever dared to do. Cornelius became the face of a new kind of television, smooth, composed, and uncompromising. He wasn't trying to entertain everyone, he was trying to represent his people on their own terms. By 1973, Soul Train was a phenomenon, bringing artists like James Brown, Aretha Franklin, and the Jackson 5 into living rooms across America. The Soul Train line, where dancers strutted down the center aisle with their best moves, became a weekly tradition. It wasn't just fun, it was identity in motion. The golden years and growing shadows. By the mid-1970s, Soul Train was unstoppable. Every Saturday, millions of viewers tuned in to watch the latest hits, the freshest fashion, and the most creative dancers America had ever seen. It wasn't just a show anymore, it was a ritual. Kids ran to the TV after breakfast, families gathered in living rooms, and communities from Chicago to Los Angeles found pride in what they saw. Don Cornelius had created something sacred. He wasn't only a host, he was a gatekeeper of culture. Don made sure every second on that stage represented dignity, talent, and pride. He demanded that his dancers move with confidence but never cross the line into vulgarity. He wanted Soul Train to be proof that black entertainment could be classy, proud, and powerful. Rosie Perez, one of the show's most famous dancers, would later recall how Don would stop a performance if he thought the moves were too suggestive. He had a vision, and no one challenged it. Yet behind the glowing stage lights, tension simmered. Dancers, though adored by fans, weren't paid for their appearances. For many, performing on Soul Train was an opportunity, not a job. They spent long weekends filming several episodes in a row, changing outfits between takes, often without rest or reward. For years, they danced purely for exposure, smiling through exhaustion because the world was watching. Some accepted it as the price of fame, others quietly felt used. Meanwhile, Soul Train became the lifeline of an entire generation of musicians. Stevie Wonder, Al Green, and Barry White gave legendary performances that blurred the line between television and church. And when a young Michael Jackson took the stage in 1973 and performed Dancing Machine, the entire country learned the robot dance that would soon evolve into the moonwalk. Moments like that defined Soul Train's golden age, electric, unforgettable, and proudly black. But Don Cornelius was growing weary. The industry around him was changing fast. Disco had taken over, and new genres were rising from the streets, especially hip-hop. Don didn't trust it. To him, rap lyrics were too raw, too negative, too far removed from the elegance he'd worked so hard to preserve. While the music world was moving toward rebellion, Soul Train stayed rooted in tradition. And that decision, though noble, would one day become its undoing. Behind the curtain, Don's perfectionism began to weigh heavily on everyone. He controlled the costumes, the lighting, even the camera angles. The show had to look perfect, sound perfect, feel perfect. To some, he was a genius. To others, he was impossible. By the late 1980s, whispers spread that Soul Train was losing touch with the next generation. The very thing Don had built to represent progress was starting to feel like the past. The decline, division, and the rise of hip-hop. By the late 1980s, the winds of music had shifted. The era of smooth soul and polished funk was fading, replaced by the raw energy of hip-hop. Across the country, rap wasn't just a genre. It was a voice for a generation that refused to be silenced. It spoke of inequality, survival, and anger. But to Don Cornelius, it sounded like chaos. He feared it would drag Soul Train into territory he didn't believe represented black excellence. In interviews, Cornelius made no secret of his discomfort. In 1992, he said bluntly, "I don't want my show overtaken by sounds that don't represent anything positive." Those words marked a divide not just between Soul Train and the new wave of artists, but between Don and the culture itself. The man who had once revolutionized representation on television now found himself out of step with the very movement he had inspired. As MTV Raps and Rap City exploded in popularity, Soul Train began to look like a relic from another era. The teenagers who once danced to Marvin Gaye were now listening to Tupac and Snoop Dogg, and they didn't see those artists on Soul Train. Ratings began to slip. Affiliates that had once fought to air the show now quietly moved it to less desirable time slots. Inside the studio, the atmosphere was no longer celebratory, it was tense. Dancers complained of being overworked and underpaid, while producers debated how to modernize the show without betraying its roots. Every small change sparked an argument. Some wanted to introduce more hip-hop acts, others loyal to Don's original vision resisted. The show that once united people through rhythm was now divided behind the scenes. And the cracks showed on screen. The choreography felt repetitive. The energy, once contagious, seemed forced. Even the famous Soul Train line lost its spark as younger dancers began drifting to newer platforms. Don, once a steady force of control, began to withdraw. His confidence was fading, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure where the culture was heading, or if Soul Train still had a place in it. Then came 1993. After 23 years of being the face of the show, Don Cornelius stepped down as host. His final sign-off, "Love, Peace, and Soul," carried a heaviness that fans could feel. It wasn't just the end of an era. It was the end of his era. The studio erupted in applause, but Don's eyes told another story. He wasn't celebrating. He was saying goodbye to something that had already slipped away. After he left, Soul Train struggled to find its footing. New hosts like Shamar Moore and Dorian Gregory brought fresh faces, but the show's identity was gone. The elegance, the authority, the unmistakable presence of Cornelius. It all vanished. For the first time, Soul Train felt like it was trying to be something it wasn't. The final years and the unreleased episode. By the early 2000s, Soul Train was a shadow of its former self. The bright lights still shone, the dancers still smiled, but the magic was gone. Ratings had dropped to half of what they once were, and younger audiences had moved on to fresher, faster shows. For a generation raised on MTV and BET, Soul Train felt like a beautiful relic, respected, but no longer essential. Don Cornelius, though no longer host, remained a silent guardian. He would occasionally visit the set in Los Angeles, watching from behind the cameras. Crew members said he looked proud and pained at the same time, proud of the legacy, pained by what it had become. The once meticulous production now suffered from disorganization and shrinking budgets. Many of the original editors and technical staff had left, replaced by newcomers who didn't share the same emotional attachment to the show. In those final years, the network executives demanded change, more modern acts, edgier performances, and anything that could attract younger viewers. The problem was that these changes came too late. Soul Train's foundation, its warmth, elegance, and sense of unity, couldn't coexist easily with the new world of shock-driven entertainment. Then, in early 2006, something unusual happened. A taping session that was supposed to be routine spiraled into chaos. According to multiple former staff members, the production team had been reshuffled just days before the shoot. Communication broke down. The guest artist, a rising hip-hop performer, was controversial, and there were disagreements between their management and Soul Train's producers about content and presentation. The performance began almost an hour late. What unfolded on stage shocked everyone in the studio. The choreography was provocative, the costumes far more revealing than anything Soul Train had allowed before. It was a jarring contrast to Don Cornelius's long-held values of sophistication and control. Though he was no longer officially in charge, Cornelius was reportedly present backstage. Witnesses later said he was furious, visibly shaken by what he saw. He demanded that the footage be pulled and called for an emergency meeting with the show's distribution partners. Tribune Entertainment, Soul Train's largest distributor, withdrew shortly afterward, citing creative concerns. That single decision was catastrophic. Within 3 weeks, nearly half of Soul Train's local affiliates had stopped airing the show. The episode was never broadcast. The internal chaos deepened. Production was suspended indefinitely, and the official website stopped updating. No statement was issued. No farewell aired. The longest-running music show in American history simply vanished. To the public, it looked like a quiet fade-out. But inside the studio, people knew the truth. That one episode, the one that was never shown, had ended Soul Train for good. Over time, rumors began to spread online. Fans whispered about the banned episode, calling it the Soul Train curse. Former staff hinted that the footage still existed in private archives but would never see the light of day. Whether out of respect or shame, no one ever confirmed exactly what happened that day. What was clear, however, was that the dream Don Cornelius had built had finally collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions, caught between past ideals and a future it no longer understood. The aftermath and Don Cornelius's final years. When Soul Train went off the air in 2006, it didn't just end a television show. It ended a chapter of American cultural identity. Fans were confused. There was no official goodbye, no tribute episode, no explanation. One Saturday the show was there, the next, it was gone. For a generation who had grown up with the words, love, peace, and soul, the silence felt like a betrayal. Don Cornelius disappeared from the public eye almost immediately. He refused interviews, declined public appearances, and stopped attending award shows. When asked about the show's end in a rare 2007 radio appearance, he said only, "I think it went far enough." It was the kind of answer that said everything and nothing at all. Those close to him described a man haunted by loss. For decades, Soul Train had been his purpose, his discipline, and his identity. Without it, there was a void. He had spent years fighting to keep it pure, to protect it from exploitation, from dilution, from turning into something cheap. But in the end, he had lost that battle. To him, Soul Train hadn't just been cancelled, it had been corrupted. Meanwhile, rumors about the banned episode grew louder. Fan forums claimed it had included explicit visuals and conflicts on set that erupted into shouting matches between crew members and management. Others believed it had simply been the final straw for a production that was already collapsing. Whatever the truth, it added a sense of mystery and tragedy to the show's disappearance. While Soul Train faded from the airwaves, the Soul Train Music Awards lived on, but not under Cornelius's control. In 2009, BT officially took over the brand, reshaping the awards into a slicker, modern production. Gone was the elegance of Don's era. In its place came a new style, flashy, youthful, corporate. It was still Soul Train in name, but not in spirit. Don was nowhere to be found. Behind closed doors, his personal life began to unravel. In 2008, he was arrested in Los Angeles on domestic violence charges, a deeply embarrassing episode for a man who had built a career preaching class and restraint. Though he avoided prison time, the incident exposed a private turmoil few had seen. Friends said he was lonely, withdrawn, and consumed by health problems. The spark that once lit every room he entered had dimmed. Then came February 1, 2012. Don Cornelius was found dead in his home from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was 75 years old. News outlets across America broke the story within hours. Tributes poured in from musicians, actors, and fans, many calling him a visionary, a pioneer, a hero. But the tragedy was undeniable. The man who had given so much joy to others had left the world in silence. In its obituary, the Los Angeles Times wrote, "He brought rhythm to television and pride to a generation." It was a fitting summary of a complicated man, a man who gave his life to an idea only to see that idea slip away in the end. Revival and the lasting legacy of Soul Train. Even after its silence, Soul Train never truly disappeared. Though the show vanished from television, its rhythm lived on through old VHS clips, YouTube uploads, and social media. A new generation discovered it online, teenagers learning the same dance moves their parents once loved. Its spirit had simply moved to a new stage. By the 2000s, historians began calling Soul Train one of the most influential shows in American history. It wasn't just entertainment, it was representation. It gave pride and visibility to black youth at a time when mainstream media rarely did. In 2019, BT revived its story with American Soul, a dramatized series about Don Cornelius. The show revealed both his brilliance and his inner struggles, showing the price he paid to make his dream real. The Smithsonian soon followed, preserving Soul Train artifacts as part of national history, proof of how deeply it shaped American culture. Even today, its energy continues through viral TikTok trends like the Soul Train line, with artists such as Lizzo and Anderson .Paak keeping its legacy alive. Nearly 20 years after that final taping, the mystery still lingers. What really happened that day? Was it rebellion, a misunderstanding, or simply the moment when time caught up to a legend? Tell us what you believe happened behind the scenes. Do you think that lost episode will ever be revealed, or is it better left in the dark? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below, because some stories deserve to be told, especially the ones that were never seen.